Queridos amigos, muy buenos días. Gracias por estar con nosotros en su programa Café con Leche, la voz de los latinos en América. Estamos transmitiendo desde hermosa 1470 96.9 FM. También estamos en YouTube y en Facebook más tardecito. Les habla Lilia Galindo, me acompaña Thomas Elias. Él es un columnista de 70 y tantos periódicos en toda California y escribe 2 veces a la semana aquí en el Antelope Valley Press. Vamos a darle la bienvenida a Thomas Elias. Good morning.
Good morning. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias. Do you know we just came from the election, and what do you think? Very few people voted, no?
I think more people voted than many of us expected. But the important thing to remember is many more people will vote in the fall, and that's partly because the Democrats about 10 years ago changed the laws in California. We used to have all these initiatives on the ballot in every election, but now they're all in November. And so that means the June primary, or even in a presidential year when the primary is in February often, we don't have that much to vote about. And so people aren't as interested. And that's deliberate. The Democrats did this because they know that in a presidential election year and a congressional election year like this one, more people will come out in November when the offices are actually decided than in the spring when you just have a primary and you're just choosing a bunch of among a whole bunch of candidates. And even if you get over 50% of the vote, the way Governor Newsom did, you still have to run again in the fall.
Oh yeah, I thought that if you get more than 50%, you didn't have to.
That's only in local elections, not in the state elections.
Wow. Bueno,
not in the legislative elections and not in the congressional elections.
Okay, let me correct that because I was saying that this morning. Bueno, fíjense, nos está hablando Thomas Elias de la elección. Dice que a pesar de que no hubo tanta participación, hubo bastante más que en el pasado, que la mayoría de la gente prefiere ir a votar a las elecciones ya de noviembre, dice, porque es cuando están incluidas más propuestas en la boleta. Dice, estos cambios se hicieron por iniciativa del Partido Demócrata y bueno, pues ahora muchísima gente espera a votar hasta allá. Y lo malo es que todavía tienen que correr nuevamente en noviembre. Esta mañana le estaba yo diciendo que si ganabas más del 50% ya no tenías que correr otra vez, pero dice que solamente es en elecciones locales, pero no en elecciones estatales o del Congreso a nivel nacional. So that means that Alex Padilla has to run also everybody else.
Yeah, Alex Padilla has to run also in the fall, and Newsom got 56% of the vote, and he has to run again. And he's running against his opponent will be a guy that got 17% of the vote, roughly a quarter of the votes that Newsom did in the primary. And the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, got 55% of the vote in the primary. He has to run again also. And, that's why the primary is just not as important as what comes next. And people read too much into these things. Like people are saying that the whole idea of criminal justice reform was rejected when Chesa Boudin, the district attorney in San Francisco, was recalled yesterday. Well, what actually happened there is that Chesa Boudin, remember, he's the son of murderers who spent more than 30 years in prison. They were members of the Weather Underground terrorist group, his parents were. So he has a lot of sympathy for prisoners and much less sympathy for their victims. And as a result, he ordered his deputies not to go after cash bail. Well, 2 years ago, the people of California voted by a 65% margin to throw out a law that the legislature had passed that tried to end cash bail. So the people want cash bail, and here comes this guy who's ordering his deputies not to go for cash bail, and they kicked him out. And that makes sense. And, you can look at Los Angeles County, where the sheriff has been very abusive, and his deputies have been very brutal, and he's going to get kicked out in the fall. He got only about 30% of the vote in the primary. He's in a runoff against the former police chief of Long Beach, Robert Luna, and I would bet my house that Luna wins in the fall, because if you're an incumbent and you only get 30% of the votes in the primary, then you're being rejected, because 70% of the people are voting for someone else.
Okay, give me
That's what happened to Alex Villanueva, who turned out to be more brutal than any of the sheriffs that went before him.
Tom, give me a break to translate, ¿eh? Bueno,
Okay.
estamos hablando de entonces de esta elección que pasó. Dice, entonces muchas personas prefieren ir a votar en noviembre. Dice, pero por ejemplo, mucha gente está leyendo los resultados de la elección de manera errónea. Dice, por ejemplo, en el caso del el abogado del distrito de San Francisco, una ciudad muy liberal, que lo quitaron ayer porque perdió, le hicieron un recall y perdió. Dice, y es una persona que tiene mucha simpatía por los prisioneros porque sus padres eran terroristas y pasaron 30 años en prisión. Entonces él tiene mucha simpatía por los prisioneros, y a pesar de que se había votado que ya no se, que sí se dejara la fianza, el 65% de las personas votaron porque sí se dejara la fianza en pie. De todos modos, él decidió remover la fianza y bueno, pues lo quitaron, ¿no? Dice, y otro caso, dice, también de personas, le preguntaba, entonces también Alex Padilla va a tener que correr. Todos los que obtuvieron, no importa el porcentaje que hayan tenido, si son de nivel federal o estatal, van a tener que correr nuevamente. Dice, por ejemplo, en el caso de Alex Villanueva, Alex Villanueva, el actual sheriff, dice, solamente obtuvo aproximadamente el 30 y tantos por ciento del voto. Y si eres una persona que está en esa posición y obtienes tan bajo porcentaje, es muy posible que te derroquen. Dice, entonces el segundo lugar, el segundo número de votos lo obtuvo Robert Luna, que es un policía que, uno del departamento de policía de Long Beach. Es muy posible que él gane la elección. What is going to happen in the city of LA? What do you think?
Okay. What's going to happen in the city of LA is that many, many more people will vote in the fall than voted in June, when a lot of people didn't even know there was an election. I don't know how they couldn't have, but they didn't, because somehow they missed all of Rick Caruso's commercials. The guy spent $40 million putting commercials on TV. Well, it got him into the runoff, but I would again bet that even though Karen Bass finished second in this election, I would bet that she comes out on top in the fall, because many, many more people will vote in the fall, and most of them will be Democrats. And people remember that Rick Caruso used to be a Republican, and he only became a Democrat when he decided to run for mayor, and he needed to become a Democrat. It's going to be a while before a Republican is elected again mayor of LA. And you have a similar situation in the 27th congressional district, where Mike Garcia got almost 50% of the votes on Tuesday night, or in the period leading up to Tuesday night. And if you combine him with the other two minor Republicans, the Republicans got about 54% of the vote, and the Democrats only got about 46%. But there will be many, many more people voting in the fall. And so Christy Smith has a real chance in that district, even though it doesn't look like it, since she was outvoted by 33,000 to 24,000 in the latest returns that the state has posted. There will be more votes counted in the next couple of weeks, but she's not going to catch up to him, that's for sure. But usually, in any congressional race, you usually have about 200,000 to 250,000 people voting. Here in this primary, you only had about 100,000 people voting. So there'll be twice as many people voting in the fall as voted now. And most of them will be Democrats. And you know this because most of the voters are Democrats.
Ok.
By a 2 to
Mira, fíjense, rápidamente estamos hablando de la elección de Los Ángeles. Dice, Rick Caruso, él solía ser un candidato republicano que se cambió ahora para al Partido Demócrata para poder correr como candidato. Dice, y muchas gentes todavía no votaron en la ciudad de Los Ángeles, a pesar de que había elecciones y que Caruso gastó muchísimo dinero en publicidad, lo pusieron muchísimo, pero todavía muy poca gente salió a votar. Lo mismo, dice, así es que yo creo que para la elección de noviembre, donde van a votar muchas más personas, Karen Bass va a ser la que resulte electa como alcalde de la ciudad de Los Ángeles. Lo que sucedió en el distrito número 27, dice aquí, Mike García obtuvo casi el 59% contra un 46% que obtuvo Christy Smith, pero dice, pues votaron aproximadamente solamente 100,000 personas, aproximadamente en ese distrito habrán de votar entre 200 y 250,000, lo que le concede a Christy Smith la posibilidad realmente de obtener este asiento. Así es que vamos a todos a salir a votar. That's good. We have 1 minute.
Yes. So the one thing to say in this 1 minute is it's very important to vote in the fall, especially if you didn't vote in the spring, because you can make a real difference in the fall. And that's really the way the system is set up. The emphasis is all on the runoff election, the general election in November. And that's why they force people with over 50% of the vote in the primary to run again in the fall, because everybody knows that not so many people vote in the primaries, and many more will vote in the general election. So if you're a Democrat out there in the 27th district, don't worry too much. You still have a real shot this fall.
Si son demócratas en el distrito 27, no se preocupen mucho, pero tienen que salir a votar en la elección de noviembre porque esa va a ser la definitiva, la que haga verdaderamente un cambio. Entonces, tenemos todos que salir a votar en noviembre para poder lograr lo que queremos. Tom, thank you so much for being with us again, and I will see you from this week to the other one, okay?
Okay, very good, Lilia. And hasta luego.
Hasta la vista, bye bye. Nos vamos,
Bye-bye.
amigos. Gracias por haber estado con nosotros. Nos vemos el día de mañana. Nos oímos.